Friday, 9:30 in the morning. What better start is there than to record a new podcast episode? And this time we have a guest from Copenhagen. Sandra, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Happy Friday.
Oh, yes. Happy Friday to you too. So it's wonderful that we will spend the next 30 minutes, 30-ish minutes around the topics of sales compensation, revenue operations, and your role. So just to kick things off, Sandra, would you feel all right to give our listeners a quick introduction to yourself? So who are you and what is your role?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been working in commercial or with and in commercial and revenue teams for almost 16 years. I really love helping a customer buy and build and unblock cross-functional collaboration. I think my core thing I've figured out over the years is really taking like a top strategy and then turning that operational and tactical, right? So what does it actually mean, that big, hairy vision that you have ahead? What does that actually mean for the day to day, month over month? What does it mean for someone in a team, right? And then I'm currently on my fifth year in tech, and I've been focusing heavily on sales and leadership enablement and also commercial operations. And in the past 3 months, I've now joined fintech. I came from EV tech before, so yeah.
So a new world for you, but I guess the role more or less is probably the same. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the company that you joined, the fintech. What are they
Yes.
doing? What is their basically the companies that they help? And yeah, what is basically maybe also the first steps that you take when you join a new company?
Ooh, good one. I'd like to start with the last question
Yeah,
first, actually.
yeah.
Um, so, like I said before, I'm pretty like I'm customer, people, and efficiency obsessed, basically. So the first step I like to take, and also took this time, is to try and get as close to customers as possible. So understanding customers. And then I find that in any industry really, but let's say especially in sales, because we are quite excitement driven and initiative driven and are very good at pitching those ideas. We tend to be more idea driven than maybe revenue gap driven.
Mhm.
So there's a certain element of getting an overview. So that was my step 2, like really trying to understand what initiatives are going on, what is the strategy, and what is the gaps or the things that we struggle with in the business, and then see where, like, how big is the revenue gap on those different things, right? And try to prioritize from that. And then third step is obviously starting to execute to some degree. Yeah. And then you also asked me about Inpay. I was really excited to join the company. I could see that there was a really, really good mix of great culture, great product, great history. Like it's a company that's really been around for a while, and then that is mixed in with every company has cycles of change, and the company is currently in a position where we're both doing really well, but there's also a lot of opportunity to optimize and improve. So yeah, it was a really, really great challenge, and I can say that the way I understood it, the company is also delivering on now that I'm a few months in. Yeah.
And having multiple opportunities is of course a good thing.
Hmm.
Sandra, now you mentioned you are very customer obsessed, and you
Hmm.
mentioned that one thing that you start off with is to get in contact with customers. I mean,
Hmm.
since revenue operations does not only focus on existing business but also new business, does it also mean you joined potential new client meetings with the sales team and existing client business existing business customers with the customer success managers?
Yes, yes. I was so lucky that within my first month already, I was able to join one of the events or fairs that the company visits every year. So one of the big ones. It was the ICE gaming conference in Barcelona. So that combined with speaking and interviewing to the different reps about what they communicate with customers about, like what do we actually talk to them about, what do they ask us about, like that kind of understanding is what I went after. I think when you're in any department in a company, understanding that and getting close to a customer is something we kind of owe to ourselves, because it's not everything is sales. Whether you are in finance or you're in dev, or you're delivering an end product to someone, and the better you understand that person, the better you can kind of prioritize, I guess, within all of those great things that comes our way in a day, that we get to choose from. Yeah, so it's a good compass to have, understanding that customer.
I can imagine, especially as you mentioned, we are in sales always excited. We do have plenty ideas which may drive revenue, but then the task of the revenue operations managers is to navigate those ideas into real revenue drivers,
Mhm.
which you also mentioned. So do you have a good strategy to navigate all of these ideas? For example, when Alex and I are speaking about our own sales process, we do also have plenty of ideas, and it's quite hard to figure which is a real revenue impact idea and which is not. So, is it just your experience and skill set, or do you have like data approach to bring in? What's your scope?
So I yes, I think so. Some parts of it comes with experience, I guess. There's always like a playbook or a blueprint, or something you've tried before that you can all of a sudden see the layout for in a new context, right? But my favorite way of doing this is through two things. So one, like I mentioned, always start with the revenue gap. If you cannot identify or tie a revenue to something, then it's probably not a P1, at least, right? I know that we have different things that we usually want in order, like a playbook. We want training. We want our CRM to run perfectly. We want data to be clean, like all that stuff, right? But if you can try to tie it to revenue, preferably multiple deals, or at least one deal, then that is usually a pretty good indicator of that the initiative or the task itself is worth going after. And then but you also don't want to be reactive, right? You want to be proactive. So there's something around whenever we list out, that's one of the things I did with the team, for example, now in my first few months. We just chucked all of the stuff that's going on. It doesn't matter if it's a super tiny task every day or if it was a big thing we're doing. We chucked it all on a whiteboard, and then we try to attach a metric to it, at least. So if it's not driving revenue, is it then driving efficiency? Is it driving hours saved? Is it driving a cost save somewhere? Revenue operations is just as much about fine-tuning that engine, right, and making it profitable as it is driving new revenue. So that's one of my favorite things. It's not complicated. It's not rocket science. It's more like really getting to, okay, if we do this thing, what will it save or generate or whatever, right? And if it's very hard to put something on it, then you table it for now, which can
That
be difficult, but yeah, that would be my way to go.
Yeah.
It sounds like a potential big whiteboard to be filled in the end as you orchestrate the entire revenue organization. Maybe
Mhm.
just a quick follow up on that. Was it like a thing to do with each department on itself, or was it a joint effort where you brought sales department and marketing department, maybe customer success together, and there was one really big whiteboard? How did you get into that topic?
That's a great question, because that ties into communication, which is also one of my favorite areas. Whenever there's this let's say, whenever there will be like a trickle down effect or a trickle up effect, how you sequence those conversations really, really matter. So I started with the team, just the RevOps team and what we have going on, right? Because that's our immediate reality, and that's the stuff that we know that we can hopefully, tie something to right away. And then I widened that circle. So my own customers or my stakeholders and own teammates in the executive team. So our sales leadership essentially. So I widened the circle to that. And then just in this case, there was also certain communication that needed to be done around what it is that RevOps actually do, how we operate and how we contribute, right? You want to be viewed as a strategic partner and not a fee burner at the end. So the last part was communicating to full company that let us reintroduce ourselves in a sense. Which was just the context here, right? It's not always needed, but it was the way to go. And then in between those like bigger milestones, close communication, obviously with C-level and with other stakeholders that would be involved. So yeah.
So that does mean that probably, if I understood correctly, that RevOps is a newly introduced role at Inpay?
Yes and no. It's kind of been. I love how in commercial industries we have like certain buzzwords and titles and things move around a bit, right? But it's not a new thing. But it's had different shapes and forms. It's been sitting different places in the org. I'm sure you guys are also aware of that you can frequently mix up sales excellence or commercial excellence and enablement and those types of terms and departments. RevOps is really just the way of tying that all together, right? So that's it wasn't a new thing, but kind of really making it super clear what it is now was needed. Yes.
Yeah, so revenue operations, you mentioned, is a kind of the glue of a company, but at the same time, the accelerator. So interesting approach to have something glued and accelerating other parts of the company at the same time. And acceleration is quite important when focusing on the sales process. So to get more leads in, to get customers closed. Can you give us a quick overview of how the sales process at Inpay looks right now and where you are impacting that process currently?
Yes. So we have a usage-based model, right? There's definitely fixed fees involved as well, but we operate with a quite classical bow tie design. So we have something coming in, right? It's just a champagne funnel where we move that way to signing, and then from there, there's 3 layers essentially. There's the customer success. There's the technical onboarding and success of the customer, and then there's a ramping phase. So where we kind of help the customer get into usage and adoption. And then once they are up and running, our CAM team takes over, and that circle of life is complete, so to say, right? So hopefully no grave, but from cradle to grave, it looks kind of like that, very very classic, I would say. And the way, at least I look at it from a RevOps perspective, is very holistically. So we obviously look at it from the very, very beginning to the very, very end. But I'm currently also still in digging through. Where do we have the biggest leakages? Where do we have the biggest opportunities for acceleration? So yeah.
And Sandra, since you moved from an EV business to a fintech business, both businesses are very different. And I guess for a fintech business, as you mentioned, it's consumption-based. So I guess the activation is way more important than it is for the other industry that you worked in, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and maybe that's also a good example of some of the first priorities we'll make. Right, what does a really really good customer onboarding look like? If you're talking the whole customer journey, we're looking at what what does great handovers look like? How do we build that customer Bible so that it really supports conversation, it doesn't repeat information extraction? How does it build relationship or continue the relationship with the customer? The most new biz teams are really, legends at building those relationships, right? So you want to make sure that, whatever is said and the vibe and the culture, in a sense, that the customer buys into along with the product is also continued throughout. Yeah.
So we had to look on the sales process, and you mentioned, it's a consumption-based model that you're working with, which usually comes with some needed collaboration with the finance team or data team, because this consumption-based level can impact commission, can also impact profit or contribution profit. What is the connector between you and the finance team, or you and the data team in that regard? Or question, is it managed by the revenue operations team itself? So do you have data scientists in your team and lead them? How does that work?
So I'll start with that last part of the question first. The team currently composes of system admin and tool stack, right? And then data analytics and insights. So we do have an analyst in the team, yes. And then we're also looking into enablement and how we can best work that and the more project-based initiatives. So those are the three different fields that we have in the team currently. With that said, we have a lovely finance team as well and a lovely data team as well that we work very, very closely with. So I'd say, responsibility-wise, again, I think I'm quite classic here in terms of let's say ownerships and stuff. So, taxonomy and a system design and revenue architecture sits with us, but then we obviously need help from data and finance to make those things work. So that's how we currently do it.
All right. Sandra, now you also mentioned that basically you are new to the company, to Inpay, 3 months in. There are a lot of things that can be done, but maybe you can also tell us what's currently, from your perspective, because I guess everyone has a different perspective, what's currently the biggest challenge that you think you want to tackle in the next month?
Oh, that's a great question. Hmm. So I think we have like a few things ahead of us, but there is something around internal tooling and gaps. We are very much like the whole business is really into AI at the moment, like everyone is, right? But on the tooling side, there are some gaps that we want to close. And tied to that is like operational efficiency, but also just the experience for the rep internally, right? And there's also an external experience there in terms of what our customers encounter in the funnel. In fintech, you obviously have the added caveat of compliance. So making that very, very smooth for someone in both end of early funnel and then onboarding is probably some of the stuff that we'll tackle first, or at least have prioritized now for Q2. Yeah.
So you're talking about KYC, KYB, so the verification process that is needed to onboard new clients?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think in the end, what comes in, and you also dropped that magical word, artificial intelligence, is all around. And it's quite similar to the introductional words that you found, that there are many ideas around AI, but also some revenue gaps. So it's not just done by introducing a fancy AI tool, but it must be some tool that really helps driving revenue. Um, Is there some tooling that you would recommend to a fellow RevOps colleague where you can say, yes, this is an AI tool which is fancy, yes, but also drives revenue?
I don't know necessarily what I would recommend. I think all people have their favorite in terms of what LLMs they're using. In my sake, it's Claude and GPT, so quite standard there. Love both of them, and especially gotten closer into Claude lately. So that's probably my favorite at the moment. Sorry, GPT, if you're hearing this, I guess you are. But I will say on the topic of AI. I read a wonderful article the other day. It was by one of the lovable women. I'm so sorry, I can't remember her name. I'll have to look that up. But she said that for anyone who is currently hesitant or maybe don't really know what to do with it, or maybe only really do very high level automation and chats, if you want to take that next step, which I think everyone should do, no matter what department they're in, if you want to take that next step into starting to build, a very good way to do it is actually just block some time, let's say 3 hours in a day somewhere in your month, and try to build, if you could, try to build your product's own company or your company's own product. And see how close you can get. If you can get very close, that is probably a sign of that market shifting into, in-house builds. If you cannot get very close, I think everyone can get close with the UI, right? But if we're talking mechanisms underneath, you probably have a bit more runway to work with in terms of innovation and time before it takes over. And I just thought that was like an incredible way to make it very tangible for someone. I also think that what's fun with AI is that, I come from the EV industry, right? And the number one reason, at least 3 years ago-ish, that people didn't really make the switch was because they simply had not tried the very act of going out and charging a car. It was like you can imagine the concept, but you haven't actually done it. You haven't actually picked up the app, tried to do the thing, start the charge and whatever, and that felt a bit overwhelming. It was like easier to just do whatever you're used to doing. And I think it's the same with AI. There's like a very human component to getting your company to make the switch. If you take those like human behaviors and human traits into account when you bring it into the company, you'll probably accelerate the adoption a lot quicker. And that's something I'm very happy to say that we do here. So we have hackathons and we have very open communication around it. So. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have a lot of questions right now. I will also still ask one more questions on that topic before we come to the last topic of this episode, because I think it's really interesting. The topic of vibe coding, you mentioned lovable, is basically omnipresent, and also something that we encounter every day. Now, you are in a very regulated space, fintech, and you also mentioned there is this little caveat of compliance. Now, are there also security concerns from, I don't know if you have a data risk officer or data compliance security officer, whatever the name might be, in terms of vibe coding at a potential risk, because security, penetration testing, etc., is something that is there for a reason. And of course, there are some measurements already in place, but I guess this is different for a fintech, right?
Yes. So I have our wonderful VP of CS and NGO sales. She worded it perfectly. It's like we have to innovate within a very rigid box, which is also kind of what makes it fun, right? It just adds an additional layer of let's say challenge when you have to innovate. But your first question was if we have all of that, and yes, I think whatever you can think of in terms of extreme security, data compliance, we have all of it, and that sometimes, no matter the department, but also for RevOps, right? That sometimes slows you down in a way, but I think it more so. I like to view it as two things. One, you can flip it around. So let's say that you have, for example, very rigid documentation. You can, instead of saying, oh, there's a new list of to-dos, right? You can call it a pipeline of optimization. So for us, whenever we look at something and it also has to be compliant, we take compliance as part of the checklist, but we still put on our, RevOps lens and commercial lens and say, how can we improve it? And then sometimes slowing down is not the worst thing. That is usually what makes the difference in, I don't know if it's vibe coding or something else, right? But slowing down just a little bit, or just taking that extra time to think through all of the design, that makes it long-term viable versus something that breaks when you start making, all of these integrations and building these systems that might be a bit spaghetti if you're new to it, right?
That makes totally sense. And speaking of commercial lens and also thinking long term and not breaking things short term, let's talk about compensation and sales commission, because this maybe is a similar approach that you can incentivize on short term goals, but in the end, things can break. So I'm quite eager to learn what your experience is regarding sales compensation or sales commissions that you made during your RevOps career. Do you have anything to share about that topic?
Yeah. So in terms of commission, I find it super, super interesting. You may have caught on already that I'm just as much as I am metric and revenue focused, I'm also very people focused. I love topics like motivation, coaching, training, because I think those are the types of topics that really takes a team from efficient to dangerous. But on commission, I have some principles that I like to work with, right? It should always support business goals. So it should support alignment. Whatever we do in the commercial org, the compensation should be tied to those bigger, hairy goals that we want to reach. I also want to always allow for some flexible components so that you can do a certain, course correction throughout the quarters or the year. Still being a big fan of that, most of the comp is tied to the actual performance and the revenue performance, but you want to make sure that you can obviously also incentivize whatever else you want to put a spotlight on for at the moment, right? If we have a certain if we have identified a certain leakage point and a certain behavior would support plugging that leakage, then if it's important enough, you may want to have that as an optional part of the compensation bag, right? But then coming back to motivation, like it should be a motivational driver. Very easy to understand and track for reps. Not because it should necessarily be simple, but making it easy to understand. Just it elevates trust. It's a noise reduction. It helps with focus. So I think those would be my 2 cents on it.
And I guess especially in the fintech space, there is a lot of complexity to it. I mean, Gregor and I have our fair share of experience in that space. And one question, Sandra, is, of course, your business model is based on consumption, but this, let's say, actual or realized revenue, contribution, whatever, profit, that usually comes at a later stage and not directly, because sometimes money is withheld and then just paid out after a certain amount of time. So question here is, I guess one thing that really is important is also the topic of forecasting when you have deals. Do you work with expected revenue for certain deals and then, I don't know, compared with the realized revenue? Or what is, let's say, a go-to approach for you in this regard for the fintech area?
It's a great question. It was one of the learning curves to go through here for sure, in terms of getting used to a new revenue model. But I'll start a little bit earlier than that. You guys asked about design earlier, right? Or customer journey. And I'd say the way I currently view it is as we have a certain pipeline of deals that we close. And then that almost turns into a new pipeline because, like you say, it's not realized yet, right? So there's something around accuracy in that ramping. How good it's almost like a second part of a new business pipeline that where you say, okay, we close a pipeline only to transfer that into a temporary pipeline before it actually becomes revenue. So that's how I kind of view that. It has a certain extra middle step there that doesn't necessarily exist in traditional SaaS where you just go seat or platform fee, right? But then forecasting wise, we very much look at historic data and run rates, right? So we tie it more to a run rate and certain performance as to how we're doing day over day, week over week, month over month. Luckily, I also have some absolute legends here in the team to work with. So we have quite good data there and have actually reached a really, really cool level of truth. But then what I've added in now is actually a executive forecast as well. So I think when you work with a usage-based model, it becomes even more important to understand if there are intelligence within the teams or within certain deals that the model cannot predict, right? Will this company accelerate their onboarding? Will we have to push them to next month? So you kind of work with two forecasts. You work in one forecast of closed deals and what that would be, and then you work with one forecast in terms of the running customers. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very insightful. So, Sandra, we touched base with so many interesting topics. I think we need to invite you to a second podcast in the future, especially when you ramp more at your current company. This podcast, unfortunately, comes to an end already, 30 minutes in. But to the end of the podcast, we usually play a quick game with our guests, which means an either-or game. So imagine you just joined a company, maybe a fintech company, could also be an EV company, but the size of the company's sales team is around 20 sales reps, and you're about to create a new compensation model. And Alex and I will ask you some question, and you have to decide if it's either the one answer from your preference or the other one. And Alex, feel free to kick things off.
All right. So, Sandra, the first question is, when you build a new compensation model, would you put the focus more on the fixed income or the fixed part of the compensation, or the variable part of the commission? The compensation, sorry.
um, how do
Yeah.
you mean?
So, yeah. So, for example, imagine you have 100,000 euros, and then that you can earn throughout the year, and then you want to apply, for example, a certain split to it. I don't know, 50% fixed, 50% variable would be, let's say, what we see a
okay.
lot.
Yes,
But
it's
maybe you say no. From your perspective, there should be a bigger focus on the fixed part, for example.
I would say 60-40, 60 fixed and 40 comp. Yeah.
Okay.
Depends a little. Like this is the thing, right? It depends. It always depends. but yeah, yeah. Let's just go with that.
It sounds like a good base. It's 60-40, and the 40%, would that be earned by a revenue share or any sort of share of the deal value, or would you create a target setting environment where I need to attain a specific target to reach that 40%?
It depends. If it's more of a so I'd say if it's more of a classical model where the revenue is very predictable, like as soon as you close a customer, you know that's the MRR and ARR you'll be working with, right? There I'd go more quota based. So are you reaching your quota or not, and that's a certain payout, right? If it's more usage based, I think I'd go share of revenue or somehow there, but I'll add a disclaimer there that I'm yet to design such a system.
All right. Okay, then very important part. I mean, lots of companies think sales reps need to reach a certain threshold, like a cliff, in order to receive commission. So question is, would you work with a cliff or without a cliff?
Yeah, so I think that ties back to the first question you asked me with the 60/40, right? I am always a big fan of very decent basic pay, right? And with that said, I then also think that comp comes with it's when you do extra, when you do well, right? And therefore, I'd say cliff. But again, it depends on the model.
Yeah, but first preference is a cliff, and that's very insightful. So
Yeah.
also on the other side of the medal, what about uncapped commission? Would you put a cap on commission earnings, or would you have it uncapped in your model?
So if the model is designed correctly, right, then the business can afford it, and therefore I would go uncapped. So hopefully you've taken all of the variables into account in protecting that margin. But if you have a rep that can fly, let them fly. That would be my answer.
So all the people that right now are in the process of applying for Inpay, you heard it? Just kidding, just kidding. Sandra, it was wonderful to have you today to talk about a lot of topics that are omnipresent right now. I mean, joining new companies, building revenue structures from scratch, or basically improving them also. How AI can be involved right now. I guess, Claude, you mentioned it, is the number one LLM used out there. And then, of course, compensation is one of our favorite topics. So thank you for sharing your views. And yeah, that's the end of it, unfortunately.
Thank you, guys. I was super happy to join. I have a question for you as well.
All right.
You obviously do these podcasts all the time. You've talked to a lot of different people, and I'm hoping to get a little bit out of that too. What is the number one thing that you guys hear around commission and designing those models? Like, what's your preferred or success model, at least, that you've heard the most at this point?
Wonderful question, and I can give you a quick answer. It depends. So in the end, what was proven as the top combination is a large focus on target attainments, so OTE models, and utilizing revenue shares or bonus payouts as spiffs. So you also mentioned that you hold back a specific budget to navigate through maybe also decisions during the year and the quarter, and having that as revenue shares or bonus payouts is the number one combination. The caveat lies in target setting for all of our guests. So whenever an OTE model is introduced, it's so hard to find the correct target, the quota to be set on each individual and each role. And if you know anyone who cracked that nut already, please forward them or him or her to us, and we will have a nice deep dive on that topic. But long story short, it's a combination, key focus on OTE and utilizing a spiff budget for revenue shares and bonus payouts throughout the year.
All right.
And maybe also to add on this, I guess we haven't had a lot of podcast episodes with people from fintech yet. So,
Yeah.
I mean, Greg and I, of course, have a background in fintech. And what you told us is also that we can confirm that there is a certain component, like the activation component, which, of course, makes more sense from a, let's say, incentivation perspective. If the reps participate, the better the client performs in the end. So, of course, there a certain share makes sense. But I'm also curious to see how compensation might shift now that AI is omnipresent, and that some business models shift from, let's say, just a usage-based, just a seat-based pricing model to maybe a combination of both. Right. So later today, for example, I will meet with the founder of Plancraft, like a software for craftsmen here in Germany. And what they recently introduced, for example, is they have now an AI that can basically answer calls for every craftsman out there. So I'm very curious also to dive deeper into this topic with Julian, the founder, maybe how their pricing model might change. And then, of course, I guess compensation is something that follows this, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's super interesting because you kind of, at least if you talk about comp, right? You want to operate within a certain, that's also why I say cliff, for example. I do believe that it should trigger once you hit a certain um, what do you say, level of your quota, right? So are you contributing actively, or are you not? But then there is a difference between target setting or budget setting and the budget setting and the target setting, right? So you want to take that into account as well. Where do we need to be minimum, and where would be nice to be, and where's the delta? Yeah.
As you mentioned, yeah, it's a very complex topic, and I guess especially with AI and, let's say, a credit-based pricing model or consumption model, it will probably shift. But this is also something I can already tease that here, which Greg and I will discuss going forward with one of the sales compensation experts in Europe. But this episode will follow. Yeah.
All right, I'll have to listen to that then.
Exactly, Sandra. So thanks again for being here to our guest today, and it was lovely talking to you, and hope the audience likes it too.
Yes, I
All right.
look forward to hearing the episode. We'll see how that is.
Wonderful.
Probably a good one. All right,
Okay.
Sandra, take
Thank
care.
you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.